Hello, today you're here with us at Culture Chat Show. My name is Dr. Marquita Byrd and my co-host is
Professor Arjun Buxi. Thank you for having us, everyone.
We're both working on this show because we are both college professors, and we thought that two professors having a discussion about cultural issues would be an important way of introducing discussion into the community and generating discussion among our students. So we developed the show just to do that. Today we're going to be talking about gender.
Absolutely, and thank you for kicking us off. So why are we talking about gender? Gender, which is different from sex, why is this important, Marquita?
Good question. I think it's important for us to talk about it today because the American public is becoming aware of the fact that gender is not either or. We talked about it from the Euro-Western tradition as gender being both either man or male or female, and you talked about in your country you have three designations.
Absolutely. For the longest time, if you fill out a government form in India, you have male, check, female, check, or other. It's existed for the longest time. And the reason for that is there is a community of, I guess you would call them intersex people.
Intersex,
I don't know the English translation. They're called eunuchs. And so these are people that are born with indeterminate gender biology. And so because, the medical facilities are not the same for everybody based on your economic position, so some people live their entire lives just like that. And we will talk about this gender assignment thing because that is an important issue. But that's to explain that this has existed, and it's not just a modern issue. This has existed.
Yes.
Indeterminacy of gender and sex has been an issue throughout the ages of humanity, really. But we're talking about it today because our understanding of gender is changing completely.
Thank goodness it's changing because the way we were thinking about gender, all of the people in between male and female didn't exist and therefore could not express themselves and their identity. And look at all of the potential we might have lost because they were struggling with this lack of being able to be recognized in society. So we're talking about gender today because of that. I started thinking about this last week because I was reading an article on the Paris fashion shows that were done just last week, and all of the shows for men were coming out. And the big rage was the agender clothes, that all of the fashions were what we would consider in the past to be feminized. Now we call them androgenized clothing. And in fact, last week also, Jaden Smith, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett's son, was named one of the 20 most fashionable men in Hollywood. And Jaden, of course, is just 16, but he does a lot of gender bending in his dress. Sometimes he wears skirts, he wears dresses and capes, and he's leading the trend in terms of making us look at gender and what that really means.
Absolutely. And so, folks, I think we're getting the idea here that there is a difference here between biological sex, the organs and the other biochemistry of your physical body, and gender as an enacted or felt identity. An example of that, those examples you gave of the celebrities and the fashion show are absolutely powerful. In a more everyday example, how this can create divides sometimes or misunderstandings. There was a very well-published story in one of the newspapers about this lady who went to a supermarket. For some reason, her little boy, who, as you know, people will put their children in the shopping cart and wheel them around the store, and so they had been given a pink toy or a Barbie doll, something that was feminine in nature, but the boy wanted it. So the mother said, why not? That's, between mother and child. You decide. This large, burly man walked up to a complete stranger, ripped away the pink toy, and yelled at the child and yelled at the mother that is inappropriate behavior. And of course, they used a little more strong language, which we need not repeat here. But I think what was powerful there was it's a choice or it's an enacted identity that, parent and child in this case are expressing, but that the world around them feels it is a personal attack or a personal affront. And so in response to that, some people are taking an extreme step. Well, I shouldn't say extreme, but taking a further step. There was another well-published two couples, one in Oregon, United States, and one in England, where they refused to share the sex of the child to the world around them. They gave as you said, an androgynous or unisex name. I think it was something like Storm or something that could fit a boy or a girl. And it bothered everybody. And this is what's becoming, and go ahead, what do you think about that?
Of course it bothers everyone, because the first question is, well, what do we call it? We don't want to keep calling it it.
Yeah.
How we don't have the language structure in place to be able to talk about people outside of male, female. Right. And it makes everybody, what kind of clothes or toys do we buy this person?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah.
And I think the first shift is that is helpful is shifting away from the two terms male and female and thinking of those as boxes, and shifting away to terms like masculine and feminine, and creating it more like a gradient, that there is variations, vast variations anywhere between those two and even within those two terms.
Exactly. Just early this spring, Facebook actually changed the for your profile how you could identify your gender. So you have male, female, and then they allow you to say cisgen, which is your body matches your gender identity, intersex, transgender. And then there, you could mix all that together. And so, of course, Facebook is, the way Facebook goes, the way, many other things go in America. But we are recognizing various genders. And as I said, cisgender is when your gender matches your biology and your gender identity match each other. There's transgender, where the body and the psychological gender don't match. And then there's intersex, where the person has genitalia that's both male and female. So we've always had that. We just never talked about it. We never wanted to recognize it.
Absolutely. And Marquita, I think, as we've mentioned in previous shows, we want to see how does this affect our day-to-day lives. How do you feel that these misunderstandings over gender affect people in a day-to-day life? Why is it a problem?
Well, it's a problem because, of course, just talking about male and female, we socialize people to behave in a certain way, and when they don't fit that pattern, then they get criticized. We put moral weight on gender identity, that male and female is a good morals, but anything in between is immoral. This person is immoral, and we shouldn't be putting moral weight on a person's identity, especially if it is something. I don't think it's something that we can say is always chosen. We don't know how we get gender identity, but all we know is that it's there, it exists, and I'm saying that we shouldn't put moral weight on who someone is.
Very true, very true. And I think this would be a really good point to share your thoughts on gender assignation at birth, assigning gender at birth.
Assigning gender at birth when we're talking about intersex, right. When people are born intersex, and that means they have both male and female genitalia, in the past, and we have about 2,000 Americans each year born who are intersexed. And in the past, the doctors would tell the parent, this child is going to be male or female based on which genitalia were prominent, what kinds of hormones were in the body, and also the chromosomal patterns in the body. The tricky thing is that they didn't wait until the child grew up to know what they were. And so they would start sewing things up, cutting things off. And so now you got this 15-year-old who has a penis and realizes that they're a woman. And I've seen that in a documentary on intersex. So we can't really assign gender identity for someone. They have to tell us. They need to tell us.
Very true. And so, folks, I think the big question and the big problem, therefore, is if you cannot even truly be perceived by people, and this is what we mean by perception. You have, when you look around the world, too much is happening, too much sensory information is coming, sounds, pictures, touch, spatial stuff, people walking around you, right? And so then you do what is called selection, right? Then you have observation, then you have labeling, and then you have categorization. And so we basically take things from around the world and we step by step label them, organize them, put them in a box.
Yes.
And so this is something that is part, again, anthropologically trained so that we know friend or foe, threat or not, those kinds of, safe practices. But again, now we have to work on those unconscious biases, which all of us have, and see what do you think, Marquita, we can do to reduce our unconscious biases towards people of transgender or people who don't fit the binary model.
I think that the first thing we have to do is broaden the, I call quote unquote stereotype, a stereotype simply being a generalization about a group of people based on what we see as similar characteristics. And we need to understand that gender is much broader than male, female, number one. And number two, we need to uncouple gender identity with morality. You know, that you're not immoral if you're not male or female, but that is who you are. And that's who we deal with. That's who we have to deal with. So we have to start with broadening the categories, and then we have to uncouple it with morality, so that the young human being that's born to us is free to become whoever they are. I think that I've been successful in life and been able to become a college professor. One, because my dad specifically, never told me that there was something I couldn't do because I was a girl. He never censored me in any way. He showed me how to work on the car. He did all those things he would do for a son. And so because he allowed me out of that gender box, I think I was able to become the woman that I am. Now, my mother was always telling me about what a lady shouldn't do and a lady should do, how I should behave. And that was beneficial also. Sure. But he freed me.
Well, that's a perfect story, perfect example, Marquita. And it really does tell us that gender, when we talk about gender and changing this view of gender that we all have today and which needs some modification, it's something that will help even those of us that identify as heterosexual, cisgender, right? Let me give you a quick story that I heard in a TED Talk. There was this lady that had done some work on guilt and shame and how guilt and shame are very powerful in shaping our identities.
Yes.
And so she interviewed many women and she published a book, very successful. She was at a bookstore and signing copies, and then a gentleman came up and said, "Can you sign one for my wife and my girls?" And she said, "Of course." And then he said, "Just curious, did you do the same work on men?" And she said, "No, I didn't." And he said, "Well, that's convenient." And so then he went on to say, well, think about it. You say I'm free to be whoever I am, but if tomorrow I share tears, if I share pain, if I fall off my white horse as the knight, would you accept me? And that was a very powerful moment for that researcher. And of course, she went ahead and did the research on men. But it's true that these gender roles can in many ways be oppressive to ourselves, let alone people that don't fit them. And so
Yes.
I think it's time that each person, whichever box you think you fit in, unbox yourself. So thank you for joining us again, folks, for this episode. Please feel free to hit the subscribe button. It won't hurt you. Like us. There's a comment box below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. And don't forget, we're on Twitter as well, at @CultureChatShow. We'll see you next time for another Culture Chat.